Alright guys, so to complete bag C, we're going to need black grease, the red Loctite, and both of these are included in the kit. An X-Acto knife, we'll use these to open up all our parts bags. A hex driver with all the necessary tips. Included in the kit is a 4-way wrench. Also included in the kit will be your Turnbuckle wrench. Not necessary but good to have is an electric screwdriver. Helps the build go by a little easier. Vice grips will be huge when building the turnbuckles, probably one of the best items to get. I like to have an extra 5/64 for this. A sanding stick for a quick tip later on in the build. A 5.5mm nut driver, makes it a little bit easier. And diff fluid. Now please refer to the manual on what diff fluid is better for your application. I'm going to stick to 125,000 weight for this. We'll talk a little bit more detail on this later. And a small set of needle nose pliers, and also good to have handy is a bigger set of needle nose pliers. So there's the tools, guys. Now let's get to building. So I'm going to go ahead and start with bag C, getting everything organized, guys. And the big thing here is the diff comes with a locker and also the sun and spider gears. Now you can decide to run whichever one you like. Normally you only run the spider gears when you're going to be actually wanting the front diff to move. So any type of racing will help. If not, you're going to want to run the locker. Pretty much only run the locker when you're doing rock crawling. I'm going to be using this more for bashing, so I'm going to set the locker aside and begin the build to the manual. Now, one thing to note is when you insert the bearings, make sure you insert them with the flange end facing the inside of the diff. This is one of those things where if you guys put those in backwards, it's kind of a pain in the butt to go back and take apart the hard drive and flip the bearing. So now we're going to apply grease. Again, an abundant amount of grease is good here. Also on the out drive. Once I get that on there, I will spread it with my finger, kind of just get everything in there and try to get it into the pinhole as well. And then I will insert it into the diff case. Everything moves freely like it should, and then you can continue with the build. I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the inside just to grease the O-ring, which I'm going to grab and place over the shaft. Like so. Then you can grab the washer, and this copper washer will actually kind of help seal and keep the O-ring down. And I like to grab my needle nose pliers and kind of use the washer to my advantage and push the O-ring down. Now this does take some time for the O-ring to seat, but it shouldn't be too much of a hassle, just like so. And once that is in, I can take my pin with the same needle nose pliers and kind of set yourself up for success here and point the hole towards one of the slots, and then you can actually insert that pin. Once you get that started, you kind of have to hold the washer down with one end and then grab the pliers and kind of get that through and make sure it's semi-centered like so. And once that's in, you kind of spin the out drive. You're going to feel, it's going to feel a little tight, but once the O-ring itself seats in, it's going to get pretty smooth. And these will break in with a little bit of time. So the next step is to add diff fluid. Now I'm going to go ahead and use 125,000 weight. I'm going to start off with this and test it. Usually the lighter the weight, guys, the more diff action you're actually going to get on the front end, which is going to help the car to go into a corner a lot faster. The heavier the fluid, the more the car is going to want to pull out of the corner. So whether you need more entry speed or more exit speed, you can tune accordingly. And if you're going to be doing crawling, just run the locker. So now I'm going to fill diff fluid and kind of work it in there, and then you put the sun gear in, guys. This is kind of crucial to make sure you get the entire diff case full with fluid. So diff fluid always goes first and the sun gear on top. Then once the sun gear is set, you can actually put the diff fluid on top. Again, this way when you put the smaller spider gears, we can ensure that all that space is filled with fluid. So now that's there. I'm going to begin to build the spider gears. And a little bit of a quick tip just to kind of note and make it easier on you guys. Obviously, these spider gears per the manual face in towards each other. And you want to make sure that the slot in the center actually points up on the first one you install. So I'm going to go ahead and install that. And then on the second one, you want to make sure that the slot faces down. These will actually key into each other. So I'm going to grab it here and I'm going to insert it like so. Once it's inserted, I kind of like to, you can see how it looks, and then I like to kind of use my fingers to kind of push them towards the outside and set the gears in. And then I like to hold this cross pins, and then I like to twist, and they'll all kind of start working their way in. They kind of need to time themselves and kind of all get in alignment. So then I'll coat them with grease like so, and now you can tell that if I hold the diff case and I spin, all of the gears spin accordingly. So we have good engagement there. Now that that's set, we can fill it with fluid, attach the other sun gear, squeeze this down, and then you can wipe off the excess diff fluid with your finger. And this is how you ensure that you 100% fill the diff case with diff fluid. If you guys don't follow this step, you kind of get some air bubbles in there and stuff like that, and then your diff doesn't feel as consistent. So now that that's done, you guys see we got consistently good fluid all the way out. Might be very, very minor air pockets in here, but again, this is pretty much solid. So now that that's done, we can start assembling the ring side, the outdrive, with using the same steps and methods that we used on the diff case side. And a quick tip is to apply a little bit of grease where the seal will actually sit, and that's actually going to help you keep it in place, making sure that your screw holes line up. And then you're going to want to set yourself up for success here, and you're actually going to want to make sure that the pins are facing the same direction. So now I know that I'm perfectly set. When I seal this, the pin should fall right in, and then I'm going to set that in. And another quick tip, guys, is go ahead and grab probably your smallest hex tool. And what you're going to want to do is grab that hex tool, and we're going to use it to align the screw holes up. Sometimes you have a little bit of diff fluid there and it's a little hard to see, but I'm going to grab the tool. Once I grab that, I kind of insert it in, move the ring around a tad bit, and you can see, shift it a little bit more, and now I went in. So now I can check all the holes, which means we're lined up, so now I won't have any issues screwing this assembly down. So now I'm going to begin actually inserting the screws, and again, I'm going to just loosely put these in there with the electric screwdriver, making sure not to tighten these. And I'm going to slowly get these close as I'm working the differential. Again, it's kind of crucial that as you slowly tighten this down, get them close, you continue to move the outdrives to make sure all the gears are properly seating themselves and move the fluid through the diff case. Now that I know all that's clear, I'm going to give it the last final little snug here. I'm going to go all the way around. Again, I'm going to kind of start at the top, the bottom, left, and move over to my right. You kind of just want to use an X pattern here. Again, I'm going to work the diff, and again, once I get this all snugged up, I'll show you kind of the tightening pattern that I use. So I usually start at the top, go to the bottom, then I'll go to the right, then I'll go to the left. I mean, you can go bottom, top, left, right, as long as you're tightening the screws so that the actual ring gear can sit and not be tweaked. That's kind of the main objective, because then you could get a little bit of leakage and also some weird gear mesh issues. So I'm going to tighten everything up, set the diff aside, and continue moving on with the build per the manual. So now that we are on the front center drive shaft, quick tip here, guys, and this is kind of one of the crucial ones, and I talked about this on part 1, is you always want to put Loctite on the set screw. This is obvious, but the not so obvious part is that you want to actually screw this down to the drum that actually goes into the CVA. And the reason you want to do this is because there's going to be grease on this assembly, which is the next step. A lot of guys will put grease and then they'll just throw the set screw in the end, and the issue is grease gets in the threads and then the Loctite will not actually hold, and you could have a potential CVA failure. So now that my set screw's in with Loctite, now I can go ahead and grease the actual drum and the drive shaft, and continue with the build. Now that that's all assembled, I'm going to go ahead and tighten down on that set screw. Again, now we're confident there's no grease within the thread, so now this should hold. So I'm going to get that nice and snug. Everything moves freely. No excess grease. Now it's time to put on the spring retainer, kind of secondary safety here, which is good. So this works similar like you do a key ring. So you slide it over, use your nail to get one of the ends over and kind of start twisting the assembly, and the spring will follow the tip of your nail and kind of seat itself into the recess. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a closer look here. You want to make sure, again, that spring is not semi-popped out or anything. It fits perfectly in there. And again, this pretty much guarantees that that CVA assembly is never going to fall apart on you guys. So now we're going to move on with the manual build. Kind of segregating my parts here, building the back of the case. And again, now we have our front driveline assembled. I'm going to go ahead and add Loctite to the set screw, and I'm going to just thread this in. Obviously, I'm not going to tighten against anything, but then I remove my tool, and there is 2 set screws. Again, just more of a secondary safety issue. Again, these things go through a lot of abuse, especially on the trail, and there's nothing worse than, you know, not being able to continue on with the trail due to a simple set screw. So we throw 2 of them on there for a little bit added safety. And the big thing here, guys, is hold down the pinion, and you're going to notice obviously the flat spots on both ends. So you have 1 flat spot, 2 flat spots. You have to make sure you actually tighten down the set screws on those flat spots in order for them to hold. So now with pressure on the pinion and holding down the front drive shaft, I'm going to go ahead and tighten those up, secure them. And again, see how they have a little bit of play there? That is okay, guys. Obviously, it doesn't need to be excessive, but that little bit of play, a little bit of float is okay on the pinion. Everything moves freely. The bearings feel good. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next step of coating the pinion with black grease. So now I'm going to go ahead and grease the ring. And I'll kind of do 2 coats, one on the inside, and then I'll kind of work my way back on the outside. With, again, this gearbox is completely sealed, guys, so don't be afraid to kind of overuse the grease here. It kind of helps with the wear and also keeping everything smooth and the temperature down. So I'm going to go ahead and insert this. Now, if you notice, this will not seat down. That is because the diff case is actually designed to only accept the ring one way. There's a smart little tooth right here. So it's kind of a cool little safety feature that we add. And so now if I go in the right way, bam, it seats right in. Again, guys, nothing worse than building these diffs that don't have that feature. Then you go ahead and give it throttle and the wheels start turning into each other. So you won't have that issue here with your twin hammers. So everything looks smooth here. I'm going to continue rotating this, and you can see the grease. It's actually spreading evenly amongst the ring and pinion, which is nice. Got a good solid coat there, like so. So once you're comfortable with that, you can go ahead and grab your diff cover and begin the install. Now that that is all tight and secure, one good thing is to check the backlash, guys. So I like to hold both of the out drives and move the drive shaft where the pinion is attached to. And you can see that there's very minor play. Even if I push all the way in or all the way out, everything moves freely. So we're good to go. You don't really want excessive backlash, and you don't also want it to be tight. So this whole assembly looks good to me. So I'm going to set that aside and continue on with the manual. Now that we have the rear toe plate installed, it's time to move on to the arms. Now, we do have a little bit of interference here, so you'll see that once I install this arm, now I do get down travel, but I don't get full down travel. Now, this, when it comes down to actually building the vehicle, it doesn't affect the performance because you don't get more down travel in this usually anyways. We can see that I do have. Now, if you're guys going to be running some longer shocks, finding ways to kind of get a little more down travel in the front, it's good to kind of add some clearance, which I already did on the left-hand side of the vehicle. You can see the difference there. So in order to do this, guys, quick tip is grab your X-Acto. Again, make sure it's nice and tight. Be super careful. And you're going to want to cut this little small section out. So I'm going to go about there halfway, flip it around, go the other way. And again, you can do this with the X-Acto or a Dremel tool, guys, whatever method you prefer. Now I'm going to install this back into the front assembly. You can see now I have no interference. So I'm going to move on to attaching the front brace. And one thing to note here, guys, is the two screws do not need to be over tightened. Again, you kind of have to adjust these so that the front arms move freely. So now that I have these a little bit backed off, you can see that I have good, smooth, the arms are good tracked, and the arms feel solid. So with that being said, we can move on. So the next step is to build the front axles. Now I'm going to move through this quickly, but I will note, guys, just in case you guys skip forward, please go back to the 10-minute, 30-second mark on this video and see the quick tip on when and how to put Loctite on the set screw. Again, cannot express that enough. Again, we do have the spring as a secondary safety feature, but a good thing is just good to spread that word since a lot of CVAs are used these days, and a lot of people don't know that. So again, I'm going to finish up the second drive shaft here and continue with my build. Once these are done, its next step is to grab the front spindle and spindle carrier, but I'm actually going to move those aside because I have the Vaterra aluminum hop-ups. These are awesome, guys. They're just going to add a new, more durability to my vehicle, so I'm going to go ahead and just substitute those in per the manual, and then I'm going to continue building. So again, nice little pieces here. All aluminum. Really, what you're going to get out of them is just more durability. So I'm going to go ahead and pop these bearings in. And this shim here is not necessarily used, but I'm going to throw it in here. It's normally only used for when you're using the plastic part. What that shim does is it actually keeps the bearings from actually tightening too much when you tighten your wheel to the axle. So on a plastic part, you actually get a little bit of squish in the plastic. So when you tighten down your wheel, it could crush those bearings and it could not make the wheels, actually move freely. On the aluminum part, you don't have that issue because it's aluminum, but I'm going to put the pin in there anyways, just to be safe. So now we're going to move on to the spindle carriers, and here they are. Cool little machine pieces. I'll be sure to add the link to these parts in the description of the video, guys. So you guys can have the part numbers. And these are actually marked left and right there, and also on the other one. So again, right being the passenger side and the left being the driver's side. And we're going to go ahead and continue with our build per the manual. So here's a huge tip, guys. Turnbuckles, especially all of our turnbuckles on the low C VTR side, if you notice, they will have a little slot offsetted to one of the sides. That slot signifies the actual thread. So this side is like a normal screw. You turn right to tighten it. On the opposite side, you have to turn, it's a reverse thread, you have to turn counterclockwise in order to tighten. And we do this so that when it's actually attached, you can turn the turnbuckle one way and it opens or closes. So again, the side with the slot is a regular screw, the other side is counter. So this was huge, guys. Some guys struggle with this a lot, get a little bit frustrated. So now that we know what it does, we're going to go ahead, and it's super helpful to grab vice grips, properly secure these to the actual turnbuckle itself. Then we can grab our rod ends. And now that we know the slot trick, we know whether to turn clockwise or counterclockwise in order to insert them. I normally like to grab another tool. Right now I'm using my 5/64, and I use that to spin it around to kind of speed up the process. So once you guys get those wrapped up, there's obviously two of them. These will be used as your camber links. We can move on with the build. Once those are built, you can grab your needle nose pliers and you can actually pop the balls into the rod ends. Several methods for doing this, but I normally like the plier method. And then I will continue on with the build according to my manual. And it's important to note that, again, guys, I'm going to insert these and then I'm going to put the camber links in place using the appropriate washers where the manual states, and the same mounting holes left and right. So now that that is in, I want to point out to not over tighten the bottom screws on the spindle carriers themselves. So if I pick this assembly up, everything is smooth. The suspension drops and everything's nice and free the way it should be. You want to make sure these screws here are nice and flush, but not over tightened, guys. Again, I cannot express this enough. There's nothing worse than, a truck that doesn't go through its travel properly. It really affects the performance. So with that being done, we can move on to the next phase of the manual. And next, we are going to start working on the cantilever suspension. So I'm going to go ahead and open the parts up and start segregating the parts to continue with the build. Now this is where the 4-way wrench that was included with the kit comes in handy. I already kind of pre-installed the post that the cantilever sits on, and I'm going to go ahead and screw this down. Once that is nice and snug, I'm going to actually insert the bearings on the cantilever, and I'm going to insert this. Now, my tip here, guys, is tighten this down all the way to where it kind of locks the cantilever in place, and then you're going to kind of loosen it until the cantilever freely moves. So I'm going to continue kind of loosening these up, and we're getting a little better there. I'm going to do one more spin, and boom. Now we're all free. You want to make sure you do this for both sides. Again, this has a big thing since it has to do with the way your suspension travel is going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the right side of the vehicle and continue on with the build. So now we're going to move on to the actual cantilever links. And again, please rewind down to the 19-minute mark for quick tips on how to build these using the slot on the turnbuckle. So now if those are built, I'm going to go ahead and pop the balls into the rod ends. And a quick thing to note once you guys get this built is on all your vehicles, and especially all mine, I face the actual turnbuckles the same. Now what I mean by this is you pay attention to the slots on the turnbuckles that we talked about at the 19-minute mark. And then I want to face those all towards the right side of the vehicle. That's normally how I build my cars. And what you want to do is this way, when you tighten it, I know that it's going to shorten the link. And when I loosen it, I know that it's going to lengthen the link. So you want to make sure all the turnbuckles face the same direction to kind of keep it clear for you and make your adjustments easier at the track. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start installing my cantilever links. So now it's time to select your sway bar. Now your kit comes with 3. First is the thin. Again, we're going to use this mainly on areas where you want the front end to articulate the most. Then is your medium sway bar. This is more of a hybrid, best in both crawling and racing conditions. And finally, your thick sway bar, which is best for racing conditions only. It's going to keep the front end really flat through the corners. And I'm going to go ahead and go with the thin one since I want my front suspension to articulate the most. I'm going to go ahead and start testing with this and see where it takes me. So now that we have that, you guys can select yours and we can continue on with the build. So a quick tip here, early in the video guys, I told you guys that it'd be really helpful if you guys have a 5.5mm nut wrench. That's because here, when you turn, it kind of hits the rear camber block. So if you use your nut wrench instead, you have no interference and it's much quicker to build. You could complete the actual task with the wrench that's included in the kit, but again, I have this handy, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to this. So just a quick little tip when you guys are timing that, and now we can go ahead and complete the other side and move on with the build. One thing to note, guys, is that there's 3 different sizes. The longer one is for the steering link that goes from the servo to the slide, and the other 2 shorter ones are the ones that go from the slide to both of your spindles. So with that being properly split up, I can go ahead and organize the rest of my parts for the build and move on. Yet again, another reminder, guys, for the last time of the video, I'm going to start building the steering links here that go from the slide to the spindles. If you guys want quick tips on how to build these more efficiently, please rewind back to the 19-minute mark of the video for specifics on that. One thing to note here, guys, is the manual does specify how the way to install this. You have to install the slide first, because if not, you won't be able to get the slide in. So the slide has to go into the actual holder, then the holder gets bolted onto the diff case, and then you can put on the top brace. But again, guys, just want to emphasize that the slide goes into the holder first. Then you can continue your assembly per the manual. So now with the complete front end assembly, here's the fun part, guys. We actually get to install the front assembly into our part 1 and part 2 chassis. So here it is. Again, you're going to use these 4 holes here, guys. So with that being said, I'm going to separate my parts here by the proper lengths. I'm going to begin building. So I'm going to make sure to put Loctite on the shorter screws that will be going into the rear aluminum toe plate. Again, kind of just good to have this, guys, because again, anything usually metal with metal, vibration does kind of get it loose, so a little bit of Loctite does go a long way here. So now I'm going to go ahead and grab the screw, throw it onto my electric screwdriver. Then I can go ahead and, big thing here, guys, is you guys want to make sure the drive shaft goes into the out drive, and you kind of have to massage it a little bit. So I'm actually going to have to turn the out drive a little bit, like so, using, bam, and I think that should be good enough to get me in, and obviously you know when it actually pops in, like so. So the top brace lines up, and so does the bottom brace. I'm going to go ahead and insert the 2 center screws that go into the dip case. Again, guys, I'm not going to fully tighten these, I'm only going to lightly secure them, and then I'm going to go back with my wrench and actually snug these down. So I'm going to go towards the outside here. Last and final screw for the bottom of the chassis. Then I always go with my wrench and actually securely snug these out. Again, the outside ones do go towards the aluminum block, so these can be super tightened, and these ones can also be tightened as well. These go into the plastic diff case. So now if that's done, I can go ahead and install the upper screws. Now, one thing that I did notice here, guys, is we do have a little interference due to the larger servo. I could insert this screw here, but not the other. For me personally, this is not a big issue. The front end is super supported on this vehicle, so I don't think that second screw is going to cause a big issue. And then another thing to notice is it might be a little difficult to put on the front shock. So this top brace might need to be removed, and then I need to install the shocks and then install the shocks with the top brace. So we're going to deal with that a little bit later on, but for now, guys, that is the complete assembly. I'm going to finally grab this here and pop the link onto the servo horn, and I think that wraps it up, guys. So now we have our steering hooked up, our front suspension in. We'll go back and adjust the camber and the toe on these on the final video, but here's the finished product. Again, guys, thank you guys very much for continuing to follow us with this build. This was part 3. We're going to move on and look out for part 4. Bye, guys.